Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the General Eclectic Podcast with Rod Dreher. I'm your host, Kale Zeldin, and here we are. What is this? Episode number 37, Rod. We're making progress here, right? The arc of history, ends in our podcast, at least today. So, what's going on in your neck of the woods, man?
Oh, it's like 88 degrees outside. Here it is in mid-October. It's normal for Louisiana.
Yeah.
But I'm going up to Chicago tomorrow. I guess by the time this gets on the air,
Sure.
I already will be there at the Touchstone Conference, which is always a great conference of Christians of all kinds. And we hope that the weather will be a little bit cooler than it is here in the swamp. How about with you?
Yeah, no, it's, honestly, the fall up here is we always like to talk about the weather. We really are those guys. But the weather's great up here, man. This is October in New England, and it's been a really kind of a warm, a pleasantly warm October. So it's like 50 in the morning and at night, and then it goes up to 70 in the afternoons. I mean, it's just ideal and it's gorgeous. For those of you who don't know, I am also, in addition to teaching humanities, I am the golf coach. So I get to spend every afternoon here in New England in the fall at a really stunning golf course, and I coach the boys and do all of that nice stuff. So it's really been nice. But got to tell you, man, I keep getting, as much as I love golf and as much as I love going outside, especially on these lovely days right now, because it won't be lovely soon. I just get, I want to come back in here and do my reading. As you can see, all my books behind me and getting prepared for this podcast. I mean, this is really what I'm itching to get into, really, with you, because there's been a lot going on. You blogged about some really, I think some important things going on. So,
oh wow, yeah, it's nuts, all the things going on now. It's like when I wake up in the morning, I look at my phone and see what fresh hell is this now. But one of the things that really caught my eye this week was something that Malcolm Kyeyune, he's a Swede who is an anti-woke leftist.
Okay.
He was blogging about the prospect of civil war in the U.S. Is it possible? And as I said on my blog, I've always been the sort of person who tells people who talk about that, are you nuts? Do you actually think that there's any force capable of resisting the U.S. military? And Kyeyune says, that's the wrong way to think about it. And he talks about how fragile our infrastructure is and how it wouldn't take much to sabotage some pretty basic artifacts or of our infrastructure and cause a lot of chaos.
Right. And so it's interesting. So, you and I are usually talking about ideas and that ideas have consequences and the various ways in which these ideas get bandied about and used and weaponized and all that. But I took his point and the link to Rod's post on this is below here in the show notes. But it's something that I honestly don't think of too much, but I have started to think about, which is the physical reality of a state's and a country's infrastructure. I live in New England. You live in a major city in Louisiana. Like, I can go like everybody else. I can click on Amazon and I literally ordered a book yesterday and it just showed up today. I ordered a couple of t-shirts, a day ago, and it's going to be here tomorrow. And so I really don't think so much about supply chains and infrastructure and all that, but it really is such a massive physical reality that is much more fragile than I had imagined. And I think that this is what this fellow is getting into. Am I right in picking this up?
I think so. I mean, look, down here in Louisiana, when Hurricane Ida came through, the entire city of New Orleans was deprived of power because the storm took down, I think, the main, I don't know what you call them, but the poles that are taking power lines into the city, they went down. So the city was without power for a long time, which is one storm. Now, what would happen if some, actual bona fide domestic terrorists started doing stuff like that? It could get really bad. And
it's something we don't really think. Again, people like me and you who we like ideas and we talk about these sorts of things and culture, and we don't really have to confront the physical miracles that happen every day.
Sure.
You know,
And
I remember, just one more thing before you get on. I remember several years back, I was listening to something that was Jordan Peterson on YouTube or something, and he was just had this moment where he was talking about the sheer miracle that buses work and that planes work and that things show up and things happen, houses are built, like the utter physicality of the world that so many people, so many people in the, the cathedral, right? The managers of our world just have no access to, no appreciation for,
Right. And I think one of the things Kyeyune was saying is that, we crap on the people far down the food chain,
totally.
and don't realize how much we all depend on them.
Right.
This past week, Southwest Airlines had a heavy work stoppage because so many of their pilots and others were calling in sick.
Wait. I thought it was the weather, Rod. Didn't that what they reported? It was the weather?
That's what they said, but the weather was great, right?
This has been the greatest weather weekend in, the whole year, right?
Well, and get this, this week I've been talking to people at different major national labs at Los Alamos and at Oak Ridge, and a lot of them are planning to quit their jobs rather than submit to the vaccine mandate. Now,
so are you connecting? So just help for our audiences, for the sake of our audience. So the vaccine mandate, I mean, are you making this some sort of connection with Southwest as well?
Sure,
right?
yeah. So Southwest, a lot of the employees there, I'm told, do not want to take the vaccine, but the airline is forcing them to or threatening to fire them, and so this is their form of protesting, like the sick out.
So this is like some incredible game of chicken that the regime, sorry, that the administration seems to be playing with this issue right now, right?
Yeah, and this is Kyeyune's point, is that what's really happening, don't look to the fact that planes aren't taking off or whatever the next thing is. So look instead to the difficulty that the federal government has in enforcing a writ of making what it wants to, making its policy, making people obey its policy.
Oh, right.
And I saw just the other day, I was talking face to face with a friend of mine who was in town, and he works at not a federal facility, but at a major scientific facility. And he was telling me that about a third of the people who work there and the staff don't want the vaccine and are prepared to walk. He says if some of these people, I think he's one of them, if he walks, they have to shut the thing down. Now, this is not a minor facility.
Wow.
And he looked at me and he said that both he and his wife is a professor, so they have decided that, if it comes down to it, they'll quit their jobs before they take the vaccine. Now, whether I think they're right or not on what they think about the vaccine is beside the point. The point is they believe that the vaccine is harmful to them, and to the point where they're willing to
potentially
sacrifice
harmful,
their jobs.
right?
Potentially
harmful.
Yeah. And this is something we're seeing all over. What happens if all these people who work at these major labs like Sandia, like Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, what if they quit?
And these are not like toy factories, right? These are not people who make golf clubs or things that we could live without, as much as I love golf, as you know. This is like major. This has national security implications, I would imagine. This has major research implications, funding, grants. I mean, this is kind of a big deal. I mean, what do you make of this? I mean, I know you have been very public and out loud, like you got the vaccine and you've traveled and you've done the green passport in Europe and the whole thing, but as the author of Live Not by Lies, I mean, what do you make of all of this?
No,
do you stand back and just watch it?
I respect people who are resisting. I don't respect everybody who resists. It depends on your reason, but most of the people who were refusing it at first, I thought they were kind of crazy. People who have like, oh, it's got the microchip in it, that sort of that's nuts.
Yeah.
But I have talked to people over the past few months, friends of mine or people I meet who are not, idiots. They are not conspiracy theorists. They looked at the research and they have serious concerns, or they convinced me that their concerns are serious enough to warrant respect. And that's all I think that they should have, that we should respect them. And I,
and I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, just it bothers me a lot when we're talking about something as invasive as an injection with um, material, biological material that we're not really sure what that's about. I mean, I just don't, even though I took the vaccines, I don't have complete trust in the government that this stuff is safe.
Yeah, I think there are lots of questions about them. I won't get into them right now, just in spirit of sort of keeping this thing moving along. But it's easy to look at crazy people who take a position and therefore in some sort of genetic fallacy way, you say, well, this person is a nut and they think this, so therefore this is also crazy. That's easy. We can play that game all day long. The left can do it on the right, and the right can do it on the left, and we can go round and round and round and say your crazies are worse than our crazies and blah, blah, blah. Right. Okay, fine. I'm not really talking about that so much. I'm really talking about, find smart people, smart people who have objections and listen to them.
Yeah.
And, they're not Q. And I think that the legacy media has not done the science, the service that it would merit. In fact, they've this whole thing has become politicized in such a way that makes me frankly quite skeptical. I mean, I was, all things being equal, it looked like this thing has been rolled out and it's been basically effective. And initially I was like, oh, people don't seem, people are fine, they're getting, you got it. A lot of other people I know got it. I convinced my parents to get it in the whole 9 yards. But then when you start hearing some things and then you look and none of this, I just am not convinced that it makes sense. And I'm not convinced that any of this makes sense. And I'm really following this closely and really reading deeply in multiple different types of sources. And nothing is making sense to me.
Okay, think about this. In the past few days, Abigail Shrier, the really brave journalist who's written a lot about the trans-industrial complex and what it's doing to teenage girls, she had this blockbuster report on Barry Weiss's Substack, in which two of the top trans medical providers in the world, including Jazz Jennings' surgeon, both of whom are male to female transgenders.
The doctors themselves, people. The doctors themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
They came out and said to Barry, said to Abigail Shrier that things are going too fast, that the industry is far too quick to give puberty blockers to kids, right? That this is going too fast. They are under tremendous stress now to dial that back. And not only that,
but they can't dial it back, right? Why can't they dial it back, Rod? I mean, this would be the same thing to do, right? Just in the spirit of caution. But why can't they, quote unquote, dial this thing back?
What do you mean?
Well, that they're claiming in the piece from Abigail Shrier that the protocols that they put in place are reckless.
Right.
And, so we're smart people, we're intelligent people. These two are doctors.
Follow the science, right?
Follow the science.
Well,
and yet
I see what you're saying. Well, they can't, because this is all about ideology. And mind you, this should be blockbuster news. It should have been on the front pages around the country. Nothing from the mainstream media. In fact, one of the two doctors, trans doctors who talked to Abigail, said that they had proposed to the New York Times doing an op-ed about, stating that we now think that we're going too far. The Times turned them down. So this is outside our coverage priorities right now. So what does that tell you?
Repeat that line, because that's just a gem of a line.
Outside our coverage priorities right now. So we know from looking at the trans story, we know that the entire medical field is willing to submit to ideology over science. And we know that the media are willing to do this too. So if they're willing to do this for trans for ideological reasons, why should we trust them on COVID vaccinations? And again, I say that as someone who has been vaccinated.
Well, you said in another one of your posts today, I think it was under the Yale Law School, the latest kerfuffle out of our Ivy League institutions, the Yale kerfuffle at the Yale Law School about the trap house of horrors. And you said something to the effect of, we clearly, it is now clear, we are being lied to constantly.
Yeah.
We really are. Like, this is not tinfoil hat time. Like,
right.
we are clearly being led to constantly by in the newspapers and the radio, on the TV. It's like and so
well
yeah, I guess what I want to ask you is, like, how am I, a layman, supposed to make sense out of what Brett Weinstein has called the fog machine of war? Because man, that's what it feels like.
I know it. Look, I have this habit of, when I get into the car, if I've gotten in and I haven't started driving by putting on a podcast to listen to with my phone, I'll just say, I'll turn on NPR. How bad could it be? Well, I'll tell you how bad. I usually last about 5, maybe 10 minutes before they say something that just drives me nuts. And sure enough, this week I was driving back home from Jimmy John's. Jimmy John's is number 7, by the way. No onions. Awesome.
Nice. You
and,
jerk who can still eat a sandwich. You jerk. I hate you. Sorry.
There was a report produced out of New Orleans by local public radio, talking about, quote unquote, pregnant people and fetuses. It's like, no, we're talking about women and babies. I could even live with the fetus thing.
Can't say
because it's at least medically
it's
accurate.
Latin. I mean, it literally just means Latin for baby. So all right.
Pregnant people, and see, this is the thing. This is not coming out of NPR headquarters. This is coming out of New Orleans.
Right.
Like, they're erasing women, they're erasing biology, and this is part of it. When I just turn the radio off, right? But when it gets down to that, I think the Associated Press might have. I didn't verify this, but one of my readers said the AP changed its style book to allow for pregnant people. It's like, wait, no, you are lying to us. You are changing our language so we can't. And Orwell got this, right? Orwell said that when they change language, it makes bad thought, quote unquote, bad thoughts impossible.
Right. And you say in that post, and again, the link is right below here, people. I had been listening to the radio of an occupying power.
Yep.
And I just thought that was a great capturing of the feeling of this whole thing.
Yeah, it
does. NPR is doing their thing, and they're working their thing like they do, and you're just like, man, this is what it feels like to watch, cable news. This is what it feels like, if you're of a certain bent. It's like they don't like me. Like, they don't like me. No. They don't like me. Like, I'm bad. Like, I should be gotten rid of, in for these people who run this show.
Well, and the whole occupying power thing too, it brings us back to what Michael Hanby, the professor at Catholic U, the philosopher, when he was explaining to me John Paul II, young Karol Wojtyła's resistance to the German occupation.
Right.
So when the Germans came in there in 1939, they wanted to conquer Poland by erasing the Poles' knowledge of themselves or awareness of themselves as a nation and their Catholic faith, because those were the two things that held them together. And they went about that in all kinds of ways. But one of the ways that we become demoralized, just a people becomes demoralized, is when occupying powers, like in that case, the Nazis, or in the case of Eastern Europe, the Soviets change language so that we can't think clearly. In Live Not by Lies, there's a quote in there from this historian in Warsaw I talked to, who said that it really worries people of his generation, because he was the last one to grow up under communism, to be aware of how communists changed the words and to make it impossible to think certain thoughts. He said that the generation under him, they grew up without communism, so they are in some sense without the antibodies to see how people in power manipulate language.
Right.
And that's what this whole pregnant people crap, that's what that's about.
Right. And I think that this dovetails this sort of picks up our earlier thread about the Civil War, and what civil wars happen when the story we tell about ourselves is no longer compelling in a shared way, so that the story can't hold us together. And so I think about this idea, that a community, a group that, you think about this, this is true in terms of families. This is true in terms of clans. This is true in terms of towns and cities and ultimately states and even a people. And this is certainly true of religions and confessions, is that we tell a story about ourselves. And, one of the miracles of these sort of super large organizations and super large nations, like the church or like the United States of America, the Roman Catholic Church in this specific instance, is that it has been remarkable in its ability to tell a compelling story that includes so many people. And if you look at the crisis, of course, of our original crisis, in this case, I mean the United States of America, the original crisis had to do with whether or not we really believed in the Declaration of Independence, that the issue of slavery, of course. And so that we were making some kind of an attempt to stretch the story to include even those people who would quibble with something as fundamental as all men are created equal, actually. And so, we were unable to do it. So a war happened. And then, you look at the various crises of the nation and crises of the culture. I think the civil rights movement on some level is a similar type thing, that the story that we told about ourselves excluded too many people.
Sure.
It excluded Black Americans and excluded marginalized peoples, et cetera. But now it doesn't seem that it's just the story that is no longer able to bind us together. It would seem like the very mechanics of the union are being eroded so that we can't even think of ourselves as a people. And I think this gets at what that, the tweet thread that you referenced this morning, that the ties that bind us together, state, local, state, and federal government together, is like a series of sort of promises, and those now promises are ripped apart, right?
When I was in DC last week for the American Conservative Gala, before the gala, I met a friend in a hotel bar, a guy I hadn't seen for a while. He's a very successful international businessman, American, but
based in DC or just
based in DC, but he does a lot of traveling for his work. And he was telling me that he just doesn't feel a sense of loyalty anymore to this country. It's not that he hates the country, it's that it's changed so much. He's a conservative, and it just has changed so much that he had to sit down with his son, who turned 18, and say, I'd be damned if I want you to go put your life on the line fighting in the military of this country. Now, again, conservative guy, but he just doesn't recognize what has happened to the country, and he doesn't have faith in the government. And I got to tell you, I had been, and I took the taxi in from Reagan National Airport to my hotel, the Mayflower Hotel on Connecticut Avenue. It was a weird thing, Kale, to go, through right in the middle of monumental Washington, and just to feel so cold towards it all. I used to live in DC back in the 90s. I loved it.
Me too.
I even though, we all have our problems with the government, still that's us. And it doesn't feel that way anymore. I mentioned that on my blog.
You did, and I was really struck by that. How about this? Try this on for size. Have you ever seen the Hunger Games movies?
No.
So in the Hunger Games movies, you've got a series of districts that are part of this union, and some of the districts are, it's sort of a rough sketch of a kind of forced federalism. And so some of the districts are wealthy, and some of the districts are not. Some of the districts had originally rebelled against the, whatever, this original Civil War. And anyway, the protagonists, they live in basically, the Rust Belt. They live in the outlier, the flyover country of there. And so the drama is that they have to get involved in some game in which every state offers up a tribute, and they go into this game to the death type thing. It's an interesting metaphor. I think it actually works. It's post-apocalyptic. So I remember watching the Hunger Games, 6, 7, 8, maybe 8 years ago for the first time. And when they go into the Capitol, you see all the sort of the wealth and the opulence, and it's just such a stark contrast to the way it looks out in the outlying districts. And I remember thinking to myself, I said, it's cool that our capital is still like, it's great. Like, it's a cool place. They've got museums and it's not like that. And now, like, as we've lived the last decade or so, I can't really say that anymore. I mean, DC is, in the surrounding towns are probably the most, wealthy and well-heeled parts of the country. And it's different now, isn't it?
Imperial City. Well, here's something that really kind of got to me. One of my readers said that he had been in DC recently, and he said he used to always like to go there. And even when he would see statues of Union generals, things like that, that, even though they had defeated his Southern ancestors in the Civil War, they were still part of who he was because they're Americans.
Right, totally.
And it made me realize that I hadn't quite put my finger on why I feel so weird about the taking down the Confederate statues, even though I'm glad the Confederacy lost, and he really put his finger on it, because whenever I look at Confederate statues, I'm glad they lost, but I also am like, they're Americans too.
Yeah.
They fought for an evil cause, but they were us. We Americans tolerated slavery for so long. And I think that when we get to the point where we're going to try to erase them from our history, this is about erasing part of who we are as a nation, all of us.
Which is a prelude to forgetting, right? It's a prelude to forgetting. And I think that's just such a necessary warts and all part of our history that we have to remember. But it does seem different, right? And sort of like my affection for, the good old US of A has taken a blow, not even for explicitly ideological reasons. It's not like an abortion issue or I don't know, whatever thing that I might care about. It's not even, it's that this Leviathan, am I going to call it this Leviathan, has grown into some sort of zombie state that I just don't recognize anymore.
Right. And here's the thing. And this is one of the things I try to
it's weird because you and I are not like political guys in this way.
No. But here's the thing. When the regime, it's not just the government, it's when all the big corporations, all the major institutions are all on the same side.
Yeah.
And not only are they on the same side, but they are about trying to unperson people who don't agree with them. This guy
to do the Yale thing. This is where I want to talk about the Trap House of Horrors.
So this is really weird. At Yale University, which is the #1 law school in the country, 4 of our Supreme Court justices graduated from Yale. This Native American student, who's part of the Federalist Society, Conservative Legal Society, he sent out an invitation to a student meeting at he called it the something Trap House. That was going to be their meeting. And, I don't know what that means. All I know is Chapo Trap House.
That's how I knew the same thing, which is like a left-wing podcast, right? Something like that.
Left-wing podcast.
Yeah.
And it turns out, though, that the Trap House is some African-American students complained about it and said this was racist and triggering.
I believe it was 7 or 8 they had 7, 8 individual complaints, although I wonder if that's coordinated.
Yeah. And so they brought this guy in. We don't know his name. He hasn't been, they brought this kid in and it's like, you have triggered people. You have been racist, blah, blah, blah. Here is an apology for you to sign. Now this kid, can you believe that?
God, I hate that. I hate that it's so on the nose, but it's so bloody Soviet. My God.
And the guy, and who was it that gave him the apology, the pre-crafted apology? The Yale Law School's diversity director. I mean, It's right there.
Here are your papers. You must sign your papers.
And this kid, God bless him, he had the courage not to do it. And according to the report in the Washington Free Beacon, the Yale told him, it's like, you have a legal career ahead of you. And what they basically said was, nice legal career you have. Shame if something happened to it.
God, so, these bastards. But
here, this is the thing.
Man,
I know. This is the thing. You'll remember my Professor Kingsfield.
Good. Yes.
Right. Elite law school.
By the way, so you met Professor Kingsfield, what, about 5 or 6 years ago? He contacted you?
Back in 2015.
2015. Okay, yeah.
I call him Professor Kingsfield. He's an elite law school professor, closeted Christian, who wrote me after the debacle in Indiana when the RFRA debacle, Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Right.
And he wrote to say, I don't know if you or your readers understand this, but this is going to be so bad for traditional Christians going forward. And he went on to say that here and, among elite law circles, where they're training the federal judges of tomorrow, because nobody's religious. And he said, what that means is they have no comprehension of what it means to be a religious believer. And this is ultimately going to affect, whatever happens in the elite law schools, given how they churn out the legal elites of this country, it is going to affect ordinary people in the decisions that they make. And people need to get ready.
Well, how, Rod? I mean, how is this new ruling class, power broker class, like what is that going to look like, honestly?
Imagine a world in which everybody agrees with Yale Law School, and that to be a member of the Federalist Society is to admit that you're a bigot, right? And Federalist Society is so mainstream, but this is how far left they are. And to use words that mean, they got on this kid because he said he was going to be serving Popeye's fried chicken there. They said, well, that's racist. Like, wait, what?
What? Like,
and then they also, the diversity guy
I put nobody in front of me in my love of Popeye's fried chicken. I know. Honest to God.
This is Louisiana. Everybody loves Popeye's. Anyway. But no, imagine people of that mentality running corporations, or sitting on the bench when these issues come before them. What we're seeing here is it would be like what happened if, say, the Catholic Church had an entire bench of bishops and cardinals who didn't actually believe what the Catholic Church taught.
Wait. This is a thought experiment, right? I mean, because I can't imagine what that would look like, Rod. Goodness, wait, are you suggesting?
I stumbled right into that one.
Too much for the mind to contain. Anyway, I will skip that for the time being. I am waiting for the synods to unfold.
Of course.
Prayers going forward for the Holy Spirit to visit. But anyway, go ahead.
But this is the thing. Those who are charged with guarding the tradition, the concrete tradition,
hate the tradition.
What if they hate it?
Right.
Like this guy, one of Dennis Prager's guys goes to Yale Law School earlier this year, went there and just started asking people on the street, would you sign my petition to abolish the U.S. Constitution? Right. And 65% of them signed. All right. So this matters.
It really does. Like, I know. And it's so weird, Rod, because like you and I both grew up as sort of like, I don't know, like semi-disaffected teenagers with all kinds of angst, and like, I never wanted to be like a jingoist or anything, like this. And yet, God will help us. Like we need it. Like you need a narrative. Like you need a narrative in order to bind us together. And we don't seem to have one.
No, because a narrative changes. And the narrative that
I should say story, but
story. Yeah. No, the story that binds us together as Americans is being eviscerated, being torn apart, and not just the story, but the document, the Constitution itself. And so I mean,
where does King's North see this going now? Like, I assume he's still in contact with you, because I remember when you broke that, when you were giving Professor Kingsfield all of that,
not King's North, Kingsfield.
Sorry, Paul. When you were giving Professor Kingsfield that space in your blog, I mean, I remember just being riveted by how he was lining everything up, and it had really captured a lot of my sort of intuitive sense of what was going on. But he really nailed it, especially as someone who lives inside the building and lives inside the cathedral, so to speak.
Yeah,
And so
I should. I
I
don't know
would
where,
love,
what.
gosh, yeah, please reach out to him. I'd love to see
Yeah.
what he's thinking of all this stuff right now.
Yeah. I would too, but he was telling us back then to prepare because this is who the elites are of tomorrow. And you remember the story I tell about the European journalist at Harvard who couldn't believe how fragile the elites were in graduate school at Harvard. That they were hardcore ideological, but they were also super fragile and did not want to hear anything that make them the least bit upset. Well, imagine people like that having the levers of power and having the levers of power in the legal field too. This is what we're talking about with Yale. I mean,
well, and it's not just in the legal field; it's the cultural production fields, right? This is a little bit of a rough transition, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the voluntary resignation of the coach for the Las Vegas Raiders, John Gruden, because in some emails that were found that he sent, I think 10 years ago, he had made some racially insensitive comments about the head of the NFL Players Association. He had made, I think he'd called Roger Goodell slang for, whatever, a gay person or something, and those sorts of things. But these were emails, private emails. I'm certainly not condoning the throwing around of racial slurs or sexual minority slurs or anything like that. But these were emails from 10 years ago, and he literally he resigned. He resigned because he had to, right? It was clearly, he was not going to sort of stick around and fight. But this is football.
Football.
This is football.
I know. But football's so woke. Did you see that on ESPN? There were people weeping on the air over this week, weeping, including a former football player. And I'm like, God, aren't you embarrassed?
God, the level of performativity in all this is really, like, it's almost impressive if it weren't so dumb and so potential. I mean, this stuff just, I worry that I talked about this before, but I don't know what, I think of a hull like a boat, right? And there's all these sort of these locks within the hull so that if if there's a hole in one of them, it seals off the rest of the ship so it stays afloat, even if there's a major gash in the boat. These locks, like, what is the lock for our culture right now? Because it's like boom, 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 boom. And again, I don't care about John Gruden. I mean, whatever. He's a football coach, and he said stupid things in an email, but like, just the this is ESPN, and they're all like performing about how awful this. Like, he's like, there's Hitler and maybe Himmler, and now John Gruden.
No, well, here's the thing why you should care. Now, as you and I are talking this afternoon, the NFL Players Association has demanded that all 650,000 emails that they went through for this process be released to the public, because we can't leave any stone unturned and we're going after a bigot. Now I'm thinking, all right, who of us, whether you're on the left, the right, whatever color, whatever your religion, whatever your politics, if you had to have all the emails you sent for 10 years made public, which of us could stand? All of us would be destroyed.
But what's the tell-us of all this? I mean, what's the goal? The goal is just destruction, right?
Destruction,
right?
Destruction. Yeah. Well, but here's the thing: it's to drive anybody who doesn't conform to this very narrow ideology. It's to drive them out of public life. And
right,
you're hearing all this racket here. There's about to be some stuff moved into the house, so I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, no, that's fun. We didn't get a chance to get into the Scott Smith and Loudoun County business either. I really wanted to talk.
Oh, don't worry, that's coming. That's going to be.
We'll kick it next week. But I want to talk. I'm struck, Rod. And again, maybe this is a little bit on brand for us. That's fine. But you just when you said today on your blog that we are being lied to constantly, and like I don't know an arena that we participate in that we're not getting hosed I mean that sort of both in the slang term and, in the image of it all, but it's like, it's constant and it's all around us. And it's like, what is up and what is down? Where's the terra firma? Like, I don't know what it is right now. And it's pretty scary. I got to be honest.
That's just it. And this is what Malcolm Kyeyune was talking about. Things are so fragile right now. The trust in authority, especially federal government authority, is very, very weak. And what happens if it comes down to states versus the feds?
Right. Well, we know what happened in 1861, right? I mean, that's not good.
Yeah. Well, I have to say too, though, and then we can end on this.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who's part of that world said that actually it would be the biggest gift of all to the feds if some people decided to start doing actual domestic terrorism, because they have so many abilities to get to people. It doesn't have to involve sending the military after them. It's like we're in such a wired society now that
it's very fragile. You know what I mean? Like in that kind of Nassim Taleb sense, like our culture right now is very not anti-fragile. Sorry, that's a really clunky way to say that, but we're in an incredibly fragile state right now, in a way that, honestly, I don't think this is normal. And so this goes back to sort of the way that I wanted to start us all off, that, the new normal is not normal.
No. But then Kyeyune says that we are pre-revolutionary. Yeah. I mean, he's a 30-something-year-old Swede, but he's a really smart guy. Yeah. I mean, you read his stuff, you think that this guy, he's onto something.
Well, he's seeing a pattern, right? And that's one of the things you and I talk quite a bit about, right? Is that we are trying to look at patterns, see where the patterns are repeating themselves. What can we sense? What can we see? Because these things they are cyclical in some very real way, and we are living through, I think, a potentially dangerous pattern. And I think we have to pay attention. Look, you and I are going to keep writing and talking and shouting out to whoever wants to hear it. So I do encourage our audience, to keep watching,
and this and we can end on this too. The Smith story you're talking about, Scott Smith, is a parent out in Loudoun County, Virginia, who was arrested for getting rowdy at a school board meeting, and he became a poster boy on the left for these right-wing hotheads who are disrupting school board meetings. What happened was his daughter was assaulted, his 9th grade daughter assaulted in a school restroom by a male who presented as a female and got access under the transgender policy of the school system. She was sexually assaulted. The kid who assaulted her, allegedly assaulted her, was arrested and charged. And the school lied about it.
And he did it again.
And he did it again. He did it again. The school lied about it, and because they wanted to keep the narrative going.
Did you see the video of that? The sort of the sneering contempt that the people on the board was like, "Does this happen? I mean, really? Yeah. This doesn't really, really, really disturbing stuff." Look, you have a 10th grade daughter. I have a 9th grade daughter. Like, this stuff's like, this is crazy.
When they start coming after kids and they're doing it, that's when a line has to be drawn. Yeah. And when you realize they're willing, and not only are they willing to lie, these educrats, but in many of these school systems, they have formal policies instructing school personnel and teachers to deceive parents if their kids are presenting as trans in school. I mean, that's
the standard protocol up here, not at my school, but at the local public schools and the surrounding public schools. That's the actual policy.
They are shredding people's ability to trust the institutions of our society, and there will be a price to pay for it. But we got to go.
We do. All right, brother, send us out.
All right, don't get nothing on you.